Hello everyone, I hope this is working and that you can see me okay. Thank you for joining me again this week. Good to be back with you, and thank you for all of your messages as well. Wow, I got so many messages through from the question I put out. And obviously today I wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on with sort of planning things, because at the moment I'm in the stage of planning my new studies for Korean for the whole of next year. So I'm going to be doing an entire year of studying Korean, and I'm going to be documenting the whole process with you all on my social media channels. So you'll be able to follow me for updates on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, and also on the blog. So the the speakingfluently.com website has the blog. So the first blog's already out, and I'm going to write a second blog post for it on Tuesday, and I'll be sharing with you a special video that I made with the wonderful Lindy Bordus, who took the time to speak to me this weekend and share her insights into learning Korean specifically. So I'm going to be putting that video together, and it will be out very, very soon. So you'll be able to enjoy that. So please do make sure you're subscribed if you haven't already, so that you can get notification as to when that's all ready and out. And in the meantime, yeah, I've been looking through a number of different resources for Korean, and I will be updating you on what I've done. And so for now, I'm going to have a look at the questions you sent me first of all. Hello, Shka, hello, nice to see you joining. Hello, everyone. Yes, it's so good to see you all here. Let me see. Is this working on Instagram? It looks like it's not. Okay. Late, but here we are. Yes, as I was saying, I'm going to be documenting the Korean progress on all. Make sure that you're ready, and especially for the special this interview that I had with her. We had a chat on the weekend, and she was very kind to give me her insights into learning Korean. So I hope that you will learn it, because I know everyone loves Lindy. She's such a lovely person, and also extremely good at learning languages too, and she's had a great experience with some of the Asian languages. So good to see you all joining. The questions that I got here, so I got quite a lot of them. What's the best schedule for a learner to learn a language? Now, as far as I'm concerned, I think that it's good to have at least 2 active study sessions a week as a minimum. That just means that we can move forward with the studies, and it means that you're not sort of just looking at exactly the same thing over and over again. Now, obviously, the more you study, the more time you spend on the language, obviously, the faster you'll make progress, unless you try and do so much that you just burn out. Of course, there is a kind of a limit to, but if you do, you should really be doing something every important, and revising things is really important. But I'd say at least two sessions a week for active study. Getting the input is really important, and revising things is really important. But I'd say at least two sessions a week for active study of language, I think is important. And that's what I will be aiming to do as a minimum for Korean moving forward. How can you improve a third language? Okay, so depending on how many languages you have, obviously the more languages you have, the more your time is divided. So there have to be points where you decide to just not work actively on a language, or to decide that, okay, at the moment this language will just be something that sits as it is at the moment, and that will be it. And otherwise, you can learn as many as you want, so 3rd or 4th or 5th or whatever you want to do, you can do it. It's just, it takes time, and it takes time away from other things that you do, of course, because you've got to be sure when you actually have time, and that's true when you're studying as well. Hi, привет, ciao, hello everyone. Hi, nice to see you all. Hola. So the same as with when you decide to study. So I say twice a week for me is an important amount of time to take just to study. And the same with languages. The more you take, the more times you have to use out of your day and out of your normal time to do it. So you yourself know best as to how much time you actually have free. Do you work? Do you have a family? Do you have other responsibilities that you have to take into consideration? And if so, how do you then manage that with your language study? And that's really, really important to get right. And that's something you have to be very, very honest with yourself about when you're planning your studies. And this is why I say planning your studies, it may sound like a very obvious thing, but actually we can sometimes run into things and say we want to do this and we want to do that, and then actually we do all the things that we said we're going to do because we haven't actually assessed the time we have free. Do I speak Finnish? A little bit. Goedenavond, yeah. Guten Abend, good evening. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining. Saluton, Chesko, nice to see you. Yeah, so I think that it's really important to think about that, and then also when you're adding a language, then obviously you are splitting your time for the languages you have on. What have I visited in Central America? I've never been to Central America, unfortunately. I've only been to the closest place to Central America is Mexico, which is obviously North America, and that's it. And then the other side, I've been to Venezuela. That's the closest part to Central America and South America that I've been to. But I'd love to go sometime. How do you know your level? That's a very good question. So when you're deciding languages and you study languages, it can often feel like you don't really know languages. It can often feel like you don't really know which kind of level you are. So it's not always easy to guess this. And I see a lot of people thinking that they are quite that high. If you were to be strict on the guidelines of the CEFR, which is the A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2, and then if you're a native speaker, an N for native. So native level speakers are N, not C2. See that happen a lot where people think that there are C2 or C1 as a native speaker, and it's not the case. It could be actually that somebody with a C2 level may may feel more at home than you in your native language. That can actually happen. But otherwise, there are people that actually get to native level as well. I think after C2, I think there's more. I think there's probably some things in between, but it's very difficult to know your level. I think it's easier when you're at sort of up to maybe the C levels. It's a lot easier to kind of determine. But once you maybe even B2 is a bit trickier to kind of determine between whether you're a B1, B2, and then B2, C1. There are kind of lots of stages in between, and there's a lot of vocabulary you have to learn to get to each of the levels. So that's the thing that really makes it very, very difficult to determine. I think probably taking an assessment is probably a good way of having an idea of that. I found it really useful to follow the Turkish levels from A1, A2, B1. I did all three of those levels and passed them, and then went on to do some B2 stuff. And it was useful because I got an idea of actually what's involved. And there's a lot more involved in an A1 level and an A2 level than we actually think. Okay, I can see apa kabar, baik. Terima kasih. Apa kabar di Indonesia? Goedenavond. Hello. Okay. Сколько языков ты сказал, были, что твой B2, C1? Это очень трудно сказать, потому что наверное, я не знаю, как хорошо я говорю, потому что когда я подучился, я знал, что у меня тоже уровень может быть это очень трудно сказать, потому что я никогда не изучал русский язык, например, но говорю. И это для меня может быть B1, я не знаю, но понимать по-русски, я думаю, что я понимаю еще лучше, потому что когда я смотрю телевизор по-русски, я без проблем понимаю новости и так далее. И поэтому это очень трудно. И стоят B1, B2, C1, когда я говорю, когда я слушаю, когда я читаю, когда что. Это очень трудно. Okay, you understand a bit of Indonesian because you're from the Netherlands. Fantastic. Okay, so let me see. I just saw the same question, sorry, in Russian, so I just answered in Russian as well. About why it's difficult for me to say which languages I speak at certain levels, because obviously I don't sit exams in all of them, and I don't learn them for that reason. How's my North Sami fluency coming along? Absolutely not, unfortunately. This female mind. I wish I could say that my North Sami went beyond the course. Unfortunately, yeah, I just did the course. It was a great course to sort of dip into North Sami to see what it was like as a language. But in terms of actually learning it to speak it, that wasn't really the scope of my study. It was more a project to understand how the language worked, to get a little bit of an idea of the language and some vocabulary and to be able to communicate a little bit. But it's a language, unfortunately, that I would never get to use. And it's very difficult how you decide to do an extra language or when you decide to study. It just depends very much on what time you have available and what resources you have just commonly. So for me, a language like North Sami is a language that realistically I would never ever hear. I would have to make quite a big effort to come into contact with it. And the same goes for a number of other languages that sometimes I just do projects for and start and play with, and then afterwards I kind of let them slide, and then if I want to go back to them I can, but I've enjoyed it as a project in and of itself. Okay, how do you plan multiple languages? Multiple languages is the same thing, really. You need to just plan the time. So I think it's really important to know why you're doing multiple languages. If you feel you're not making progress with multiple languages, then it's good to leave one or two to the side, because they're never going to go away. You can always go back to them. The issue is that if you take on multiple languages, I've seen many people get very frustrated with languages that they don't feel like making very much progress in, and it's because they're dividing their time. You divide your time as soon as you add more languages. You divide your time. So as long as you're happy with a slower progress in your languages, then by all means go ahead and do as many as you want. But it's very good to know what time you've got available and be realistic with yourself and set realistic goals. What would be a good planning for somebody disorganized? Yeah, I think being honest with yourself as a bare minimum is the most important thing. So as far as I'm concerned with any language, how's my Korean going so far? Yeah, not so far it's just learning to read at the moment. So I'm just sort of getting into the alphabet and looking at my resources. So let me give you an example with Korean, for example, with where disorganized, you're talking about disorganized. Looking at where you actually use your language is really important. So for me, a language like Korean, I don't hear it here at all. I'd never hear it. There are no Koreans that I know anywhere near me. It's not a language I come across on a normal day-to-day basis. The reasons for studying it are simply because my daughter wants to learn it, so I'm taking a year to study it with her. Otherwise, yeah, is it a language I would naturally choose to study? Possibly not. But I've then got to look at ways to motivate myself to do it. And my motivation is for my daughter really to learn it. She wants to learn it because she's interested in some people on the internet who produce content in Korean. And so things that I would do then are looking for things that I can integrate into my life. Like, for example, Korean music would be a very simple one to do. Other things would be maybe watching the Korean soap or something that I could watch during some time off. And then also planning a trip I find is a big motivator for me. So if I know that I'm going to go to the place, then I'm sort of thinking that I'm going to promise myself and my daughter a trip to Korea so that we can go and practice our Korean. Did you try? Yes, I've tried to learn. Yes, I have studied some Georgian. So I've tried to learn a difficult language. I think Korean's categorized as a fairly difficult language for native English speakers. And I've tried Georgian as well. Yes, I found Georgian challenging, partly because of this reason of not having time, but my situation has changed recently. So actually now I can more easily adapt my time to languages I choose. And then during my normal day-to-day stuff, work and things like that, then I will continue to use the languages I normally use. Can I show you a few pages of my Maltese books? Unfortunately, I've not got my Maltese books with me right now, but they're really, really good, and they are aimed at people learning them by themselves. Yes, they're absolutely, and they're slightly different to Teach Yourself and Colloquial in that they're basically a story or a dialogue in the one book. The other book describes the grammar, so they have 3 separate books for each level, and then the other book is the vocabulary that's used. So you can go through all of it separately, and you're supposed to go through it together and combine it when you study. But it's pretty good. It's got the audio with it, so I think you'll enjoy it. What's the most rare language to use? I don't know what you mean, actually. There are lots of languages that are slightly challenging to use because not many people use them around me. Do you mean for me or do you mean just generally? ¿Has escrito un libro? Parece que cada políglota tiene un libro. Así parece, ¿no? Estoy pensando en hacer eso ahora, así que me gustaría, sí. La verdad es que hasta ahora yo sigo trabajando también con una empresa de redes sociales, así que es una agencia y trabajo con ellos y doy consejos cómo manejar proyectos en varios idiomas, en varios países, y así pues eso es mi trabajo, así que no tenía tiempo para escribir un libro ni nada, pero estoy pensando en hacer eso ahora, porque estoy cambiando un poco mi modo de trabajar y me gustaría, sería bastante interesante para mí. How do you maintain similar languages like Spanish and French? Spanish and French, not so bad because I learned French when I was a child and then Spanish when I was at school. So I don't find that too difficult. But other languages, for sure, it takes time and practicing them a lot to not mix them up. Just going to go back to some of the questions I had sent in. How does one create a multilingual environment for a child that stimulates language development? Wow, that's a very big question. Possibly a little bit out of the scope of this conversation, but I'm happy to do helping children in languages. It's something that I've been doing for many years. My daughter's now 13, and we've been raising her with 5 languages. How do you manage so many personalities for all the languages? I don't perceive that I have different personalities in different languages. So I never understand this question fully. I find that I'm the same person in all of the languages. See, subtitles, are they a help or a hindrance? Subtitles can be a help if you're learning a language and you use them actively. So the key is actively or passively. If you're using them to actually really study the language and understand the language and pay attention to the language, they can be really helpful. I learned my Dutch and my Serbian Croatian from subtitles for sure. But you can obviously read subtitles and they just go in one ear out the other, or in one eye out to the other, however you say it with subtitles. You could basically just ignore them. You can learn to ignore them, just read them because you understand them and not focus on the actual language. And it's very easy, even when you listen to language over and over again, or you read language over and over again, it's very easy to just get into passive mode, and then you don't actually improve your language ability. All you do is simply you just keep reading the same things over and again, just understand it and enjoy the story. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not language learning, it's just language practice. How do you get accustomed to dialects? With practice. Some languages just have some very, very different dialects and can get super complicated. But on the whole, yeah, it's just practice and coming into contact with people. You meet people from certain places and you find out how they say different things, and it becomes part of the conversation. The same way as it does for people who are from the country. I find that they often talk to each other about these differences, and I think as a learner as well, you do the same thing. You sort of start asking about how do you say this? How do you say that exactly? And then you pick it up at the time. Being away from the UK, how often do you use Welsh now? Especially this year, because this year with COVID, it's been very difficult. It's obviously I don't get to go back to the UK for 10 months. It's something crazy. So yeah, and it's one of those languages that again I in the Balkans you don't get to hear Welsh very often. I do try and do something on the internet every now and again, and it's great. But yeah, it just don't know how great it would be, but it's okay. Do you know something about Indian languages? I studied a little bit of Romani, which is an Indic language. Indian language is actually from India, like it's spoken in India now. A little bit less. Obviously, being from the UK, we have a big connection with India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and I feel actually kind of quite close to them in a strange way because of the connection with those countries. Yeah, it's they're part of the Commonwealth, so I feel that tie for sure. And I've always felt close. I think also because I grew up with friends whose parents were originally from those countries as well. So some of my friends at school, my best friends at school, actually were the parents were from mainly Bangladesh, but from other parts of India and Pakistan as well. Apa bahasa ini bisa bicara untuk saya bisa bicara dalam bahasa Indonesia sedikit-sedikit, dan saya sekarang saya bicara dengan orang Indonesia di internet setiap minggu. Tapi saya pikir itu bahasa yang bagus untuk saya untuk bicara, tetapi saya belum bisa bicara baik. Okay. Hola Richard, it was interesting how Albanian has the R sound similar to American R. Being in the Balkans, do you have an explanation as to why the letter sound in the speech language? Some just do. I don't know if there's a real explanation for this. It's R, that R sound. Yeah, they do. I don't know. Maybe there is an explanation. But I'm not sure about it. I'd be interested to know. So you find out, Luis? Let me know. How do you build a lot of vocabulary very fast? Yes, I had a question about this, about vocabulary. How do you memorize vocabulary? Do I write lists of sentences and read it every day? I definitely don't write lists of vocabulary and read them every single day. I use different ways of learning vocabulary. Usually I try to remember it because of hooks, so things that sound similar, things that remind me of the word to help me remember it, kind of like the memory palace type technique that you have for people who learn lots and lots of words or dates or things very quickly. They use these kinds of techniques to, like stories, to make things stand out. So if I find it difficult to remember a word, I try and remember those things. And then if it's something that's just similar, like for example, in the beginning when I started learning the Romance languages, it was very simple to remember, situation, situación, situastal, situation, or situazione. It's very simple to remember all of those things because they're the same word pretty much, just with a very easy to remember change in the way that they're expressed in the other language. But yeah, generally I try and remember some stories and things. Okay. How do I build? Okay, let me see. I think that Richard Bill on Mount Rushmore, language and Steve Kaufman, Luca Lambriello. I'm still trying to think of the fourth. That's funny. I don't know about that. I don't know. Poor people having to visit me on a mountain. Emotions feel different in the language. In the other language, in the other do you just slightly feel there's a slightly different flavor to them? So yes, there are absolutely. Which language do you think has more Slavic vocabulary? Vlach, a Romanian, which is spoken it's actually spoken in North Macedonia, it's spoken in Romania, it's spoken in Greece, and it's spoken in Albania, and it's spoken in Serbia too. At least those 5 countries that I know that there are Vlach minorities. Okay. I think there's which has got more Slavic vocabulary. I would suspect that Vlach spoken in either North Macedonia or Serbia would have more Slavic vocabulary because than Romanian, standard Romanian, just because of where it's positioned. But it would also have a more Turkish vocabulary too, I imagine, because of that. It may also have, they tend to have more Greek as well. So there's there are more Greek turns of phrase in Vlach. Hebat sekali Richard, saya mengerti yang kamu katakan, bagaimana perasaan kamu saat ada orang yang terserah oleh Okay, I didn't get all of that, unfortunately. I'm sorry. Saya sudah lupa. Okay, let me see. I'm just going to try and catch up with some of these other questions. I'm sorry if I'm a bit slow with these. Let me see. How do you memorize vocab? Yes, I think I did that one. Okay. Got any tips for an exchange student living in Spain and currently studying for ISO A2 at the moment? Okay. So if you're an exchange student, I think that the important thing is throwing yourself really into the language and the people and using as much as possible. Sometimes it's super, super frustrating to do it. I think that nowadays, with the internet and technology being so easy to talk to people in different languages, it's a good thing and a bad thing. The good thing about it is that we can access any language anywhere in the world, anytime. That's good to a point. For a language learner, it can be a bad thing because it means that if you go abroad and live in a different country for a year or 2 or whatever, you actually can just stay in touch with everybody back home super, super easily. And you can even watch TV and films and radio and everything else in your own language or in another language that you speak well. And you never need to, in your own language or in another language that you speak well, and you never need to use the language of the country where you are. And I've seen that happen a lot. And so as hard as it was when I went and lived abroad before all of the internet happened, the way it is now, it was actually easier to learn languages because you have no choice. You had to go through the pain barrier of being frustrated every single day because you couldn't really express everything you wanted to. And you need to be able to do that and also be able to fight that urge to look at all of your stuff in the other languages that you speak. So I would say definitely try to do that as best you can, or at least only give yourself an hour a day or so on your device in another language. If you don't go through the pain barrier, I find that you don't really advance as far. What I find happens with people with languages is that they will get to a level where they can talk to people about very simple things, about things that they maybe even not just simple things, but things that they feel comfortable speaking about. But when it gets to things that are super complex or require quite specific vocabulary, that's when things break down, and that's when it gets hard, and getting out of your comfort zone is the important thing to do. So definitely, if you can avoid looking at your devices and using that as a crutch, I would say do that as much as you possibly can. Yeah, there are definitely disadvantages to all of this modern technology. As much as I love it and embrace it, I have to admit that I think that living abroad now, you have a harder time learning the language than when I was younger. although there are probably more resources to be actually able to do it, which is very strange. Your accent in Spanish is perfect. How do you study pronunciation? Strange, thank you very much for the compliment. I actually don't really study pronunciation so much. In the beginning of any language, I like to be able to pronounce the language. And so I tend not to skip those first chapters on pronunciation. So I like to focus on, okay, how do I say this word? How do I say these things? If I'm not saying them perfectly, I don't worry to the point that it stops me moving forward. But what I do is I like to try and go through that to make sure I can say and represent the language faithfully. The few ways I've done that in the past, and now it's kind of more just, it happens more. We'd listen to how we spoke, we'd listen to the original and then how we pronounced it, and then compare and then get feedback also from a native speaker. The other things that I would do would be to try and imitate the foreign accent in my own language. So for example, if I were to try and imitate a Spanish accent in English, I would then hear the sounds of Spanish more clearly because they're using my words. So I would do things like that because I thought that helped. And then just transpose the words and the grammar back onto the accent, if that makes sense. So they're some of the tricks that I've used in the past to do this. Listening to songs, listening to the radio, listening for the melody of the language, the porosity, how it sounds is super important. So I do all those kinds of things too. Let me see. So I've just got some questions here. How old am I? I'm 43. How do you get off the plateau in Germanic languages? It takes time. I find that the plateau thing that we talk about often, what we actually mean is that we're still learning lots and lots of vocabulary so that we can feel that we've reached a point where we go up again to the next level. And I think it is just a matter of time. It can be super, super frustrating though, and I get that. Can I go live with you? I think I'd probably frustrate you with all my languages after a while. ¿Quién interesado en practicar español y ayudarme con el inglés? A ver, si alguien quiere practicar y hacer algo, pues podéis escribiros aquí también para encontrar con otra persona interesada por esto. Okay. Do you know Turkish? Evet, Türkçe konuşurum. Turkish, learning Turkish better. Turkish takes time. Turkish is one of those languages that in the beginning it feels super simple to express your ideas in language, and then after a while it's sort of to speak it in an authentic way, it just tends to take a lot of practice because of the way you formulate your phrases and how you join sentences together. It just takes so much time to get it all, and I think it's just as much input as possible and then trying to recreate that sentence pattern and sentence structure by either creating your own sentences as much as possible and using them either in writing and or in speaking as well, depending on how often you get to use your Turkish. But yeah, I'd say there are quite a lot of books out there. I mean, you can look at the Yunus Emre Institute. They have quite a lot of materials, so you could look at that. And then on YouTube, there are some videos as well for Turkish where you can listen to dialogues and scenarios in Turkish. So there are quite a lot of things like that. I'm trying to think what they're called now. So there's the Easy Turkish. There's Easy Turkish out there. There's another one as well, and I'm trying to think of the name of it, but I can't. Okay. Let's see if I've missed any of your messages here. What do you think from your experience? Exist any cultural differences between Dutch people and Swedes? Yeah, absolutely. There are different cultural differences between Dutch people and Swedes because they've got very different histories. So in the Netherlands, in the Netherlands, Dutch people are very independent generally. So if you live there, you could walk around in a clown suit and no one would even look at you in the Netherlands. I mean, it's because the mentality is based off in the Netherlands they call it the ik mentaliteit, and it means basically the I mentality. So Dutch people tend to just look out for what they're doing and they carry on doing their own thing. And if you don't bother them, they don't bother you. And that's kind of the underlying thing in the Netherlands that I find in society, in Dutch society. In Sweden, not so. I mean, there are some similarities clearly because they're both Northern European countries, but I would say Swedes are definitely, they've got this more socialist kind of mentality of, not this kind of, not talking about communism and socialism in that way, but I think this kind of, they tend to band together and they will talk to each other and give each other advice, maybe more than Dutch people. Dutch people would find you giving each other advice or telling people what to do, they would find that actually just too rude. In my experience of the Netherlands, living in the Netherlands, and living with and around Swedes. Harry, have you learned Arabic? Can you explain how to understand the Arabic alphabet? For example, okay. Alif, okay, B, Alif, B, okay, D, B. Okay, in order doesn't mean A, B, C, D. This doesn't mean so. Yeah, so Carol, learning the Arabic alphabet, I would say, yeah, it's probably not going to be so useful to give an equivalent compared to A, B, C, D, because, well, first of all, the Arabic alphabet doesn't contain all of the vowels. The vowels are written on separately. There are some long vowels, which are also letters. So they have a different sound depending on whether it's used as a consonant or a vowel. But there are not many letters in the Arabic alphabet. Compared to the English alphabet, there are a lot fewer. And so I find that writing words, this is what I found, writing words in Arabic actually was pretty useful to sort of get going with it and sort of writing things that I knew. Writing simple words like bab, which is the word for a door. I see you've used alpha and A and the ab there. So bab would be the b, ab, bab. And writing things like that tends to help to sort of get you used to pronouncing them, but not thinking of it as a kind of an alphabet that you're going to sing, for example, in the same way as English. One of my friends, Judith Meyer, wrote these script hacking books, and I've got the Korean one here just to have it. I haven't had this on my desk because I'm learning Korean, but she has an Arabic one as well, so you might want to have a look at that and see if that helps you as well. There are lots of, these books are quite cool because they have practice of how to practice writing it. And then if you're doing that in conjunction with the book that you have the sounds, you may want to use the extra practice sessions in Judith's book to achieve, and has like pages to actually practice the Korean here. So you may want to do that and try that out. Saluton Richard, mi estas komencanta en Esperanto. Kiel vi fartas hodiaŭ? Bone, dankon. Kiel vi fartas? Fartas bone. We are about the same age. I'm 45. Yeah, cool. In order to memorize words, do you write them down or just remember it? Sometimes I write things down. I like to write things down generally because I find muscle memory is quite good. They're quite a good thing to do, and to just use as many techniques as possible to get things in my head. But yeah, I mean, I've used lots of different techniques for language learning, actually. Depending on the language, I might write more or less. Just depends on sort of my mood. It depends on which language it is. If it's a language that's similar to one I already speak, I'd probably write less. Whereas if it's a very different language, I'll probably write more because it's good to practice the writing as well. And it also helps me to remember things more easily, whereas languages that are similar, it tends to, I already have sort of things in my head that help me to remember what the word is and what it means. So yeah, that's kind of why I do more or less depending on the language. Okay, some tips for learning Japanese for an Italian. Wow, Giovanni, it's I think learning Italian, learning Japanese, I would say that there are some courses that we used at the university when I studied. I studied Japanese for a semester at university, and it was Genki. Genki was the book, and I found that book to be quite good. It's a little bit hard going if you're doing it on your own. I'm guessing you're doing it on your own, but it's a pretty good book. Otherwise, to get into Japanese, I'm trying to think of anything written in Italian because I'm not quite sure. I've got a feeling that Asimile's book is written in Italian as well. I know the Arabic one is. Asimile might be a place to start, but also I think the Genki book I found actually to be quite good for Japanese, and so I'd probably look at that. I went through Genki level 1 as part of my course, and yeah, it helped a lot. Okay, what do I find most difficult regarding Dutch? Probably the hardest thing to learn for anyone learning Dutch is actually probably using it. Dutch people are convinced that it's a very difficult language. I'm not quite so sure. I think it's more difficult just to get people to speak to you. But yeah, it's not so bad. I've studied another language in the past to intermediate level, French, German, Italian, and shelved them, focus on one language. Now I want to pick them up again, but okay, but can't decide which one to begin with. What's the one? Any tips? Yeah, I'd say go with the one that you're going to have most use out of at the moment. So have a think about which one you realistically need to do. So which one would you most likely come into contact with? Which one are you most likely to have any links with or communication with people in that language? And go for that. Yeah. Hans Martinez. Let's see. Hello, Richard. Doing tips for material in total. German. Yeah. Okay. So depending on what you've got, if you've got a book, Hans, I think looking at books that you like is really important. So you've got to look for it. But there are lots of materials in German, so I can't recommend one course because there are just so many things in German, and it depends on your liking, it depends on your interest and what you like. But there is a good YouTube series called, actually it's not on YouTube, but it's on YouTube, and it's called Extra, EXTR, and then an @ sign, and you can just write an extra with the @ sign instead of an A, German, and you'll find some nice learner series there for you with easy language to start picking up German. The thing that I thought was quite a cool series, and it was on years ago, and I don't know if it exists anymore. I'm trying to think what it was called. Deutsch Plus. Yeah, so Deutsch Plus, and it was it had a series with a guy called Nico from Romania, and you follow Nico around and you learn German with Nico. That was really good. I also used, when I learned German, I bought the InLingua. The InLingua is a language school that I found in Germany, and I bought all of their German level books, and I went through them on my own, and I found them to be quite good actually. They explain the language pretty well. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Capito, Genki assimila. Grazie, prego, Giovanni. In bocca al lupo. Okay. Okay. Swedish, and personally, yes, okay, so funny, yeah, I've learned Swedish. I studied at university in the UK. So the pronunciation is a bit tricky. We used the colloquial book for Swedish because my professor at university wrote it. So you could use that if you wanted, but also equally the Teach Yourself book is of a similar quality, I think, for Swedish. The Assimil also has a Swedish book. The pronunciation, I think, is super important that you spend a lot of time doing that. We spent a year just learning to pronounce Swedish at university. Record your voice, make sure you can make all the vowel sounds, make sure you can make the long vowel sounds and the short vowel sounds. Pay attention also to the consonants that run together, like the R and the S that make a sh sound. And yeah, there are things like that in Swedish that I think it is important to pay attention to. So definitely doing that. If you like any Swedish music, one of my favorite, all-time favorites Swedish artists is called Lisa Ekdahl. I'm going to write her name here because she's definitely worth a shout out. Ekdahl. Lisa Ekdahl. Her Swedish songs are particularly nice, and she's got a song called Vem vet? Vem vet? Inte du, vem vet? Inte jag. Vi vet ingenting, vi vet inget idag. I love it. I love Lisa Ekdahl. So that helps actually. Singing Swedish is really, really good for practicing. They've also got some really cool songs. I mean, loads of cool songs in Swedish. Swedes have great music. I love Swedish music. But Lisa Ekdahl, I don't like it when she sings in English, but I do like her Swedish. And the other, I'm trying to think if there's another one. There's an old one that I used to listen to years ago, but it sounds probably a bit dated now. But Lisa Ekdahl, if you listen to Vem vet or Open Up Ditt Fönster, which is Open Ditt, I can't write I haven't got my Open Up Ditt Fönster. Unfortunately, I can't write all the accent marks, the diacritics, because I've got my keyboard on British English at the moment. But yeah, if you look up Open Up Ditt Fönster, then you can see that's a really nice song as well. Enjoy. ¿Cómo mejorar mi pronunciación en inglés? Pues hablando con la gente, grabando tu voz también es muy importante, porque así que puedes hacer una comparación entre lo que escuchas y lo que produce. Y eso para mí también me ayuda bastante con los idiomas. Si tengo que tener más cuidado con cómo hablo, sí que me ayuda bastante. Así que esto, y también hablando con gente de madrelingua que le van a ayudar también con la pronunciación del idioma, y te pueden dar también consejos, y pregunta bien dónde está la lengua en la boca, dónde está situada, de dónde sale el aire, qué haces con la lengua, qué haces con, no sé, con la garganta, por ejemplo. Hay vibraciones en la garganta, porque eso sí son preguntas muy, muy fáciles para la gente para decirte, pues sí, así funciona en mi boca, en mi garganta, pues sí que hay algunas vibraciones, así que así puedes saber de dónde sale el sonido, y eso sí que es muy importante. Zdravo, kakos. Gordana, odkajsi. Sí, estudiar 4 lenguas por año es fácil, mas ¿cómo mantener manter 4 línguas e ainda aprender? Isso sim é difícil dizer, porque acho que falando muitas línguas é uma coisa que você tem que saber realmente, é uma coisa que você precisa de fazer na vida, ou uma coisa que simplesmente você quiser fazer somente para ser, não sei, para ser políglota, não sei. Isso sim que é muito importante, porque você tem realmente de fazer uma vida com as línguas, e não somente aprender as línguas somente assim. Porque aprender as línguas assim é uma coisa que você pode fazer, mas depois disso, para onde você vai com as línguas, você tem que ter também um plano para saber como usar todas as línguas na vida. Isso sim é verdade. Do you have a background in learning Greek language? Yes, I speak some Greek. Μιλάω ελληνικά, ναι. Για μένα η έμαθα ελληνικά εδώ, πάω στην Ολλανδία μία φορά, αλλά μόνο για 1 χρόνο, και μετά από εδώ στη Βορεια Μακεδονία, τώρα πηγαίνουμε μαζί στην Ελλάδα κάθε 2 μήνες. Πηγαίνουμε μαζί με το αυτοκίνητο μας στην Ελλάδα και να κάνουμε μια βόλτα μόνο, και στα καστήματα στην Ελλάδα, στη Θεσσαλονίκη, και πρέπει να μιλήσω ελληνικά με την χώρα εκεί, και έμαθα ελληνικά γι' αυτό. Και ναι, και βέβαια είναι μια γλώσσα που θα ήθελα να μιλήσω καλύτερα, και τώρα έχω μία φορά στην εβδομάδα έχω με ποιον να μιλήσω στα ελληνικά, και είναι εντάξει, και νομίζω ότι με τον ιό μιλάω καλύτερα τώρα, γιατί πρέπει να μιλήσω για πολλά πράγματα που κανονικό δεν πρέπει να πω. και γι' αυτό. Από πού είσαι? Είσαι από την Ελλάδα? Do you find, okay. What do you find most difficult about learning Spanish? Do you know what? It's been so long learning Spanish, because I learned Spanish when I was about 16 at school, and it's really not. Yeah, it's not. It's actually a language that now I found the verbs in the beginning, I think, probably were the toughest thing to get my head around. But yeah, it's just become so normal now, I think, Spanish. What's the difficult thing for me in Turkish? The sentence constructions. They're super complicated. So to say things that you want to say, it gets quite complicated. Did I learn Danish? Yeah, you can snack it dansk. Yeah, jag var i Danmark med gång. Det var godt. Men det ikke som svensk. Jeg snakker bedre svensk end dansk. Det normalt. What method do you recommend for me memorizing Russian words? Because I have problems trying to memorize some. Yeah, that just honestly, seriously, it took me ages to learn the Slavic vocabulary, because there's a lot of very basic Slavic vocabulary that's the same throughout all of the Slavic languages or similar. And it took me a long time. I'm talking years. It took me years to feel very comfortable with the Slavic vocabulary. Yeah. Can I speak Persian? Unfortunately, I started learning Persian, and then I had a huge break, and I haven't gone back to it properly yet. But I speak a little, and I understand a little Persian. Very little though, very little. What's your opinion about classical languages like Latin, ancient Greek, Sanskrit, and Pali? Okay, there are no native speakers anymore. Difficult to practice conversation. Alphonse, yeah, I think that they're all nice. I think that I particularly like the sound of Latin, and there are actually groups of people who do speak Latin still, like living Latin groups, and I believe that type of thing exists as well for Sanskrit. Pali, I don't know, but Greek as well, ancient Greek. I've got a feeling that there are people that speak something similar to ancient Greek. They found villages somewhere in Turkey where they still speak varieties of something a lot closer to ancient Greek, but I'm maybe going crazy with these things now. Am I familiar with colloquial Albanian? Colloquial Albanian, do I recommend it? Sorry, no, I don't recommend colloquial Albanian. I didn't find it to be a particularly I didn't find it particularly useful myself. Discovering Albanian is probably the best book that I've found for it. Although I do have to also preface this, in Discovering Albania, they have all of these notes saying how people speak in North Macedonia and Kosovo, and some of the things that they say I've never heard anyone use at all. And I've actually actively asked people. They give different names of the months, and I've never heard them used in Skopje particularly. So there are things like that to be aware of, but the language generally is good in Discovering Albanian. So I would use that one. Any tips on learning Mandarin Chinese? What's effective? I used Integrated Chinese, which was a really cool book. We used that at the university in Sweden. I used level 1, the level 1.1, level 1.2, and then intermediate integrated Chinese. I used all 3 of those, and I found those to be really, really good. So I would recommend those if you want to get really into Chinese. And yeah, the teachers were really good. Also, there's some cool courses on Udemy for Chinese where you can actually go through the entire, like, loads of like college level Chinese, university level Chinese. They call it college level because it's based on American systems, right? But yeah, university levels. And there's so much stuff in Chinese now. It's incredible. Like, loads of things I'd follow as well. Like, there are loads of cool things on, loads of cool Chinese channels on Instagram and on YouTube, and even on Twitter. You can find things in Chinese all the time. On TikTok, there are people doing Chinese things as well. It's super cool. There are loads of things that you can use. Just make sure you select and you start liking and showing that you're not interested in the nonsense that you get if you're using, particularly if you're using TikTok. A lovely app, but it does give you a lot of nonsense, and you can waste a lot of time on TikTok watching people dance and watching people fall off things and do all sorts of crazy things. Let me see. Here we go. Okay, head of the Khanty language. No, I don't know those actually, Tim. No, I don't. Oh, they're spoken in Russia. Okay, yeah, they're part of that group. I knew there were lots of languages like that spoken in that part of Russia, but I didn't know those particular ones. I don't know much about them. The only languages in that group that I really know anything about are Finnish, Estonian, and Hungarian. Should I divide my study time equally between 4 skills: writing, speaking, listening? Hussein, yes, possibly. I think that it tends to be that you do that in a more natural way. That's kind of my experience. So I think, yes, if you can do it in a conscious way, and if it feels conscious, but I tend to combine them together because I find that they're combined. Maybe more writing and reading and speaking and listening is sort of quite combined. You know, you're listening anyway, right? So, and also you can write. You can also do exercises where you listen to something and try and write down what they're saying, transcribe it. Okay. Unfortunately, I think I'm getting to my hour, but I'm I'm sorry to have to leave you all. Thank you so much for coming and joining me, and I really appreciate it. I think something crazy happened with Facebook, so I have to look what happened with that. It seemed to just, the screen's gone black. I don't know what's going on. But I'll finish this now so that I can save the I can save this live on Instagram, and yeah, I will look forward to seeing you all again soon next week. Take care, and if there are any things that you want to ask, feel free to reach out and to let me know. Nice to see you all again. Take care. Bye-bye.